afternoon. My name is Shaquille, and I decided to do my presentation as a collage. Here in this collage, I will go through every photo and I'll basically just, elaborate on what I've learned through this semester about the deaf culture. I would like to start out with this gentleman right here. His name is Andrew J. Foster. Andrew J. Foster is actually a guy who's considered um, the godfather of deaf education in America. He actually was the first African American to attend Gallaudet University and graduate. And he actually took what he learned from there as well throughout the years of him, being deaf. He actually took that in Africa, and which he started with his disciples, at least 13 or 14 schools in about over 30 churches. A lot of students that attend his schools in Africa, when they do go to Gallaudet, they achieve greatness there. A lot of them do have and will end up with their masters and bachelors or bachelors. This guy right here plays a big part in the deaf community. This guy is Laurent Clark. Laurent Clark, he's important, and he's somebody that I enjoy learning about because he's one of the reasons why we have ASL today. He pretty much learned a lot of his sign language from the Royal Institute in Paris. He met a gentleman named Gallaudet as he was traveling in England, and both of them guys will eventually, in the future, will create what we have today, which is ASL, and that will go to the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, where he actually, Laurent Clark. This is the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, where Laurent Clark will actually become the president and the person who will basically will run the school. The Pennsylvania School for the Deaf is the third oldest school in America for deaf children. It was founded in 1820, and in 1870, that's when the first time they started to practice with speech development. And that's pretty much it. Right here is the alphabet. This was the first alphabet printed from Paris on how the ASL letters will look like. This was the first printing of ASL, which we know today, but during that time it was LSF. Right here is a guy named William House. This gentleman right here plays an important role in the community as well. William House was the first American to actually do surgery on the cochlear, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, implant. He was the first person to do surgery. And a cochlear implant is pretty much another version of the hearing aid. And he was the first person in America to actually do surgery on that. So that's something that I learned this year. This picture right here, the old guy with the children, old guy with the child. I decided to depict this picture, because this is a picture that to me is vintage. And what I mean by that, the whole hearing aid that he have. This is an old hearing aid that they probably use. I'm not sure if they use this in all around the world, but I chose this picture because I wanted to show how hard it was for deaf people back in the day to understand, the majority, and that was the hearing community. And I just wanted to get an insight on, what they had to go through and the things that they had to get accustomed to in order to hear, order to understand the hearing community. So that's why I chose that picture. Right here is another guy that plays a big role in the community. This is Paul Hubert. And Paul Hubert actually attended Gallaudet University. And he was actually the quarterback for the Gallaudet football team. And he plays a big role to me because during that time, people don't give a lot of credit to the whole, sports, the whole, people don't give credit to the deaf community when it comes to sports. And the deaf community played a big role in sports. And he played a big role in it because during this time, the huddle that we see today in a lot of sports events, it came from the deaf community. And that came about because during that time, it was a football game going on. You know, both teams were deaf. And if I'm not mistaken, both teams were deaf, or one team was deaf and the other side was a hearing person. But one of the guys on the opposing team was hearing, and he knew ASL. He knew sign language. And once they found that out, what they did was, in order for them to not let the opposing team, the adversary, see their sign, they will form a huddle. And that's where the huddle came about, you know, from the football team from Gallaudet University. This right here is the Connecticut Asylum. And a long time ago, this was considered, well, not considered, but called the Institution for the Deaf and Dumb. But later on, they would change that and call it the Connecticut Asylum. And this is actually the first school, you know, that was created in the United States for the deaf children. It was created, well, it was funded by a guy named Cogswell, and it was ran by a guy named Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, and the gentleman that I spoke on earlier, Laurent Clark. This school was created for a lot of deaf children to get more education, and that education can be in sign language and just everyday life, like math, science, Spanish, not Spanish, but math, science, history, religion. And one of the first students actually was Mr. Cogswell's daughter, Alice. And, you know, Alice was someone that we all know who influenced Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet to go to England to learn what he learned, which he would eventually run into Laurent Clark, in which we'll have ASL today. And that's what leads me to this picture right here. This is an ASL picture right here. In ASL, it's considered a visual language, you know, to the deaf community. ASL roots goes back to the French, and you know that's pretty much where it all started. And you know that's why the alphabet came. The alphabet was originally for, you know, people who sometimes, you know, couldn't talk when they needed, and that was why it was created. It was also created, you know, for brotherhood. It was just another form of language that they wanted to use. And ASL plays a big part, not only in the deaf community, but for me as well. You know, ASL is definitely has kept me on a straight and narrow. You know, what I mean by straight and narrow means is that, you know, it's keeping me focused. The practice that I have to use in order for me to be a good ASL signer is just keeping me to continue to keep my mind going, you know, to continue to do things that's going to make me a better individual and just overall a better sign language signer. So I enjoy learning ASL. It's something that I just respect highly. You know, it's keeping me, you know, on a path of just greatness. It makes me want to continue to do great, because in order to be great, you know, it's, you know, I have to practice every day, and you know that plays a big role in my life. And this right here is actually the NAD, the National Association of the Deaf, and this was created, you know, to help the deaf community. It was supposed to be like it was supposed to be a group to where they can express what the deaf community feels like. It was a group created to just be the voice of the community, and it was also created to get better education for the deaf community. And that's what will lead me to the MCE, which is the Manual Coded English. And MCE was initially created to help the deaf children, you know, understand English. And eventually that wouldn't really work, because it wasn't the child's native tongue, native language, I would say. And in order for you to teach a child, you know, anything, you have to talk their native way. and their native way was ASL, not main recorded English. And that's because the MCE is a mixture of English and sign language, well, ASL. And when you have certain words that's in English and you're trying to sign that to a child whose native tongue is just ASL, that can be pretty hard. So, you know, I encourage everybody to know more ASL than MCE. And that's pretty much it. Thank you. Finish.